A petition by gay activists successfully gets the founder of Starbucks to snub a major Christian conference. How should Christians respond to this growing trend? This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with Tom Minery, the Executive Director of CitizenLink. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
Let me set this up a bit with the most recent example we've seen. Howard Schultz, the founder and also the head of Starbucks, which is one of the largest corporations on the entire planet, was scheduled to speak at the Willow Creek Association's Global Leadership Summit, which was held last Thursday and Friday. It was centered in Chicago, but it was watched by 150,000 people all over the planet, including a couple hundred locations here in the U.S. Well, a gay activist started a petition on a website called change.org, and in that petition claimed that the Willow Creek Church, quote, has a long history of anti-gay persecution. Now, he got just over 700 people to sign his petition, and Schultz canceled his appearance at the Willow Creek Summit. Bill Hybels, the senior pastor of Willow Creek, shared this at the summit.
This whole thing is sad to me on a number of different levels. First, if the organizers of this petition had simply taken the time to call us, we would have explained to them, as we have to many others, that Willow is not only not anti-gay, Willow is not anti-anybody. Our church was founded on the idea that people matter to God. All people of all backgrounds, colors, ethnicities, and sexual orientations. The mat at every door on this campus has always read, "Welcome." And for over 35 years, we have flung the doors of this campus open to the widest array of humanity I have ever witnessed in a local church. And thousands, tens of thousands, have come to learn the teachings of Jesus. So to suggest that we check sexual orientation or any other kind of issue at our doors is simply not true. Just ask the hundreds of people with same-sex attraction who attend our church every week. Now, what is true is that we challenge homosexuals and heterosexuals to live out the sexual ethics taught in the scriptures, which encourages full sexual expression between a man and a woman in the context of marriage and prescribes sexual abstinence and purity for everybody else. But even as we challenge all of our people to these biblical standards, we do so with grace-filled spirits, knowing the confusion and brokenness that is rampant in our fallen world. And at Willow, we honor the journey of everyone who's sincerely attempting to follow Christ. So it's unfortunate that we could not have explained this to those who called us anti-gay and started this petition.
Now, he went on to say that there's a, quote, growing trend, specifically in the United States culture, to throw stones first and then ask questions later. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I would say it's more than that. They're not just throwing stones. They want him to get off the street. They want Christians to go away. Those who do not embrace the concept of same-sex marriage, and that's what this all gets back to, are deemed to be hateful or anti-gay. And just 700 or so people were enough to make this CEO at Starbucks run for cover. I'm sorry that he did that, but I appreciate Bill Hybels' explanation.
Now, he's a bit of a lightning rod for controversy, and this conference in particular has gotten a lot of criticism over the years because of some of the speakers invited. In this case, that's ironic, because here we have a summit where not all the speakers are professed Christians necessarily, and there are many different versions of Christianity, if you will, and they're invited in. And Bill Hybels shared at the beginning of this thing that while we're Christian in our presentation, we're agnostic toward the speakers. This is a leadership conference. We just want to bring in the best speakers we can find, hear what they have to say, take what's useful, and ignore what's not particularly useful. So the conference is open to pretty much anybody. It is a tolerant conference. But here we have a gay activist, which is on the side of tolerance and diversity and all that kind of thing, who says you can't go to that conference because, and here we are.
Yeah, well, Bill Hybels was very gracious in saying if they had only come to us first and would sit down with us, he indicated he was sure that we could come to some agreement on the fact that we are not anti-gay, but that is not true. It is the fact that his church still supports the biblical view of marriage, and the biblical view of sexuality is enough. That's enough to be getting him labeled anti-gay. So sitting down with graciousness is not enough.
Now, part of what he suggested for a response was simply this. He said, we want you not to go after the folks at Starbucks. Don't be nasty toward them. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said, write them a note with a Christ-like attitude, and he said, I'm only going to say this once at that point in his presentation, but write them a note saying that Mr. Schultz is welcome at this year's conference. We'd be welcome to him coming at next year's conference. And then he went on to say, why don't you go to Starbucks, buy a cup of coffee, and go buy his book called Onward about the restructuring of Starbucks to show support for the company, in the sense that these are Christians saying we're still open and welcome to him coming and speaking at our conference.
And this is, of course, not the first time we've seen something like this. We've seen in recent months where Apple has kicked out an app for the Manhattan Declaration, which is the project of Chuck Colson and also Professor Robert George at Princeton University, to state in a very sturdy yet plain fashion what Christians stand for regarding human sexuality and marriage. And that was enough to get a petition started against Apple, and Apple kicked them off. We also saw an app from Apple being knocked out.
From Exodus International.
Yeah, that's where you're going. Well, yeah, it's an Apple app from Exodus.
Yeah.
And it was simply explaining who Exodus is. Exodus is a very loving, very compassionate group, umbrella group for so-called ex-gay ministries, those who try to help people who are struggling out of the unwanted sexual orientation called homosexuality, at least the lifestyle of homosexuality. And there is not a nasty bone in the body of anybody working at Exodus International. They're our friends, but because they have this view of homosexuality, that is enough to get their app kicked out from Apple.
And they're used to being misrepresented. I mean, the folks who started this petition called it a gay cure app, and presented it as if with this app you'd run up to somebody on the street and cure them of their gayness, which of course is not true. They also use a trite phrase, pray away the gay. Exodus International is a ministry for people who are unhappy with their homosexual attractions and want to change, and are seeking to do that through faith in Jesus Christ, which is a way to do that, and perhaps the only way. It's a struggle. It's hard. It's difficult. But it's not nearly as flip as the folks who oppose it would say.
Well, that's well said. That's a very disdainful label that Christians say one can pray away the gay. It's not nice to say things like that about something that is such a difficult struggle as homosexuality. And here's how ridiculous this is getting. Change.org, this website we've been talking about, also had a petition on its website aimed at Sesame Street. And the petition was to get Sesame Street to finally allow Bert and Ernie to get married, plainly thinking that Bert and Ernie are two gay male puppets who ought to get married. And Sesame Street responded simply by saying, no, Bert and Ernie are simply good friends.
And they are puppets.
Yeah,
the rest of the statement went.
Yeah.
But that's, for those of you who may not know, those in the gay community have long hinted that Bert and Ernie have some kind of relationship beyond just being good friends. The Sesame Street folks have denied that and said that's just not the way it is. So don't fret about Bert and Ernie, but it's the folks on the other side who are wanting to bring politics into a kids show like that. Now, one other example, the folks at the Christian Values Network, which was recently renamed the CGBG, it's a website that's basically an online mall where you can buy from major retailers and others, and you can buy flowers, electronics, I don't know what all on there. But a petition was started on change.org, and suddenly we see that a number of companies, Apple, Microsoft, Macy's, The Gap, Expedia, and others, all pulled their presence from this website based on that protest by gay activists, saying that these are hate groups that you're supporting through this Christian Values Network, through CGBG.
Yeah, hate groups meaning us, Focus on the Family, meaning a Family Research Council, Christian groups that try to stand up for God's institution of marriage. And quite a few, what I'm trying to say is not very many petitions were enough to get I think junior level executives at these huge corporations to decline to participate in this online shopping mall. I think common sense will prevail in the months ahead. I don't sense that this is going to continue to grow as people realize, now wait a minute, we're a large corporation, large retailer. We have a lot of people of a lot of different political persuasions and religious beliefs. And if we try to pull ourselves away from those whose religious beliefs do not agree with those who operate this change.org website, we're going to be pulled apart. We just have to stay away from it and serve all people.
Now, the response to this is always the question. The other part of Willow Creek's response was they allowed Howard Schultz to break the contract without any penalties. They just let him go, and it was a clean break, if you will. They also are extending love and grace back to the folks at the Starbucks Corporation. But here's the thing. It only takes a few hundred petitions from the other side to blow over a corporation, to just knock them over and they just fall. I think that's because they're already tipping that way, they're already leaning. What kind of response would it take, and what would the nature of the response be from Christian groups like ours and folks like those who are watching right now to try to convince these corporations that they're being had?
Well, our initial response is to write very sensible, plain, and kind letters to senior executives at some of these corporations, letting them know what is going on, how few petitions have caused the corporation to take its wares away from this online shopping mall. Already we've seen several large retailers say, well, this is nuts. We're going back on. We didn't know about this. And we hear that a lot, that down several layers in the management chain is someone who's made the decision to pull a retailer away from an online bookstore. And when senior management, the CEO or people close to him or her, get wind of it, it's likely to change. And so we're hopeful that our letters and those of other Christian organizations who have been affected by this pullout of the online bookstore, we think when those letters make their way to the executive suites, things will be turned around. We're
seeing quite a trend here. Everything we've talked about pretty much has happened in the past 7 months.
Yeah.
And just one after another after another. And again, if we had a petition that only got 750 responses, we'd call it a failure.
We would.
I mean, that would be a horrible return on issuing a petition out there, yet it's enough in this climate to change things. Talk about this cultural shift that we're seeing, that taking a biblical stand for God's design for sexuality, for relationships, has now become somehow anathema to corporate life.
Oh, well, there are those activists, mostly gay activist organizations, that believe that the views held by this organization and others like ours are views that can only originate in hate toward homosexual people. Obviously, we've said that's not true, and our actions and our words and our websites prove the opposite. Nonetheless, they profess not to be satisfied until our view is erased from the public conversation. That's why Bill Hybels' very gracious offer to have these people come in and sit down and talk will not be accepted, because they believe that Bill Hybels just ought to go away until he changes his view.
All right. Tom, thank you for your insights on this. And we also want to point out, by the way, there's a lot of discussion this week about the presidential race. We've got a separate CitizenLink report. If you go to the homepage of CitizenLink.com and look for the video player on the right side, you'll find that other report where we talk about those who are putting their hats in the ring for 2012. And you can learn more there if you go again to the homepage of CitizenLink.com. And thank you for watching. We do appreciate hearing from you. You may always write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. And we encourage you to pray for both those at Starbucks and other corporations around the country as they make decisions about whether to participate in events held by Christian organizations. Pray also for wisdom for Christian leaders around the country, that our response is one that is winsome and that will draw them back to realize that we're the ones who are being open to their appearing. It's the folks on the other side who are being exclusive and also divisive in their attitudes about this. And remember, stand tall and be heard.